Vasey from the Scarborough Maritime Heritage Centre will now read the story of the bombardment of Scarborough. Mark.
On this day, at this hour, 100 years ago, Scarboroughians were getting dressed for work and preparing for Christmas. Shortly after 8 o'clock, the town was ferociously attacked from the sea. 2 German battle cruisers came out of a fog bank and opened fire on the castle headland. Shells hit the Coast Guard station, the empty army barracks, the keep and walls. It was the start of the town's worst attack since the English Civil War. A 3rd German ship sailed on towards Filey, laying over 100 mines that would later kill at least 100 mariners. When the battle cruisers cleared the headland, they fired on the sea-bathing infirmary that was already full of wounded soldiers returned from the Western Front. Shells hit the Olympia Picture Palace, the Bell Hotel and houses on Eastborough. 29-year-old Herbert Greenwood had his legs broken by a shell landing in King Street just behind us. The health offices, Red Cross Society, Waterworks Office, Falconers Road, York Place and Huntress Row were hit, and holes were blasted into the elegant houses on the Crescent. A shell passed through the workroom at Marshall and Snellgrove's department store. A few minutes later, and it would have been packed with seamstresses. The Town Hall and Royal Hotel were hit, and 160 windows shattered. Southcliffe was next. The Wesleyan Church, St Martin's on the Hill and the Vicarage were hit. Albion Road and Crescent Road suffered from shrapnel. On the corner of South Street, 47-year-old shop worker Leonard Ellis was the first to die as he opened the door to his place of work. A second shell exploded a few yards away, killing 45-year-old Harry Frith. Shells peppered the Valley Road and Municipal School. At Scarborough College, one teacher led his students over Oliver's Mount to safety. After the first 15 minutes of firing, there was a pause while the ships turned around. Mrs. Alice Duffield set off to find her husband, but was sadly killed on the steps of a nearby hotel when the firing resumed. On Farley Road, 41-year-old postman Alfred Beale was killed on the steps of Denoley House. Inside, 29-year-old maid Margaret Briggs was also killed by a shell exploding in the library. 39-year-old maid Edith Crosby was the next to die. It was the day her fiancé was returning from the Western Front to marry her. At the electricity station, Private Bowman of the 5th Green Howards had both his legs shattered by an explosion. Houses in Springbank, Westbank, Highfield and the length of Seymour Road suffered damage. On Westbourne Park, 42-year-old Bertha McIntyre died as she picked up her 14-month-old baby John. Both were killed, but the father survived. The Fallsgrave Road and Gladstone Road areas suffered half the fatalities. A teenager and several adults lost their legs. 28-year-old maid Ada Crow died as she tried to convince her employer the noise was just from Navy gunnery practice. At Gladstone Road School, a shell brought down the roof. Half an hour later, and many children would have been killed while standing in assembly. 30-year-old Emily Merriweather died ushering people into her shop's cellar for safety on Prospect Road. Shoemaker Harry Harland left his home on Bellevue Street arriving at work at the same time as some shells. He ran home, gathered his family and set off for the countryside. Sadly, he was fatally injured at the end of his street. 60-year-old Mary Prue suffered a similar fate. John Hall, architect, aged 65, was the oldest person to die in the raid. Number 2 Wycombe Street was the site of the worst tragedy, where 4 members of the same family were killed. John Ward, aged 9, died along with his grandmother, Joanne Bennett, his uncle Albert, and another child, George Barnes, aged 5. Christopher Bennett survived the blast and gave this account. I found Mother and the children in one corner. Mother had lost a hand. We moved her into the yard with little Jack and George, but it was all too late. Christopher later joined the army to avenge these deaths, but was killed on the Western Front in 1917. 15-year-old George Taylor was the only Boy Scout to die throughout the entire war. He was killed collecting a newspaper from a local shop. 18 died in this barbaric attack, and many more were maimed and injured. 14-year-old Lily Bain emerged unscathed from the ruins of her family home. Her miraculous escape gave people cause for hope. Others refused to come out after the raid and took a lot of persuading that it was safe. On Wycombe Street, a naked child was seen running away, and many children were found in Scalby village being cared for by strangers. The German ships sailed north and shelled Whitby before meeting up with other battle cruisers that had just attacked Hartlepool, where they had killed and injured many more. Scarborough was not a military target. It was an easy target, close to a gap in the East Coast minefield and on a direct line from the German naval base. It is hard for us to imagine what it would have been like. The ferocity and terror striking innocent civilians going about their daily lives. The Kaiser and the German Navy thought the attack would be a great boost for their country's morale and a great blow to the British nation. Sadly, their plan backfired, and the anger that killing women and children caused led to a huge boost in recruitment of soldiers to fight on the Western Front. The British Navy had some tough questions to answer. Why had they not intercepted or stopped the raid from happening altogether? Winston Churchill branded the German Navy as the baby killers of Scarborough, and the phrase was reproduced on hundreds of newspaper front pages across the globe. What became clear from that day forward was that civilians were now classed as legitimate targets in the Great War. On this day, let us remember all the innocent victims and hope and pray that events like this never happen anywhere in the world again. Thank you.
We will remember them.
Lady Mayor, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is entirely appropriate that I am here today representing Her Majesty the Queen, because this is a very significant commemoration. 100 years ago today, the act of terror which occurred in Scarborough changed the way the British public perceived the whole war. Until then, our troops had fought abroad and it seemed remote and the British public was safe. After this event, the British public were in the front line, and that of course was followed by the airship raids in other parts of the country. It was an act of terrorism, and indeed it was our 9/11. That's how significant it was. The amazing thing is that the enemies of 100 years ago are today our firm friends, colleagues and allies. And it shows how magnanimous the people of Scarborough really are. Because later today, we will actually go to church and we will pray for the people who died and commemorate them. Whatever your religion, whatever your name for God, when we do present ourselves in front of our Maker, shorn of all the rhetoric that goes with war and the belligerence, we are all the same people. And the message of today that should go from Scarborough is simply this: peace and goodwill to all men, including our enemies of today, because the people of Scarborough have proved that the enemies of today can be our friends and colleagues of tomorrow. Thank you.